What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Punching Up. I am your host, Maya May, and fascism is up. Put your earmuffs on or ear pods or something. Fascism is fucking up our kids. They see everything that's happening. I hear about things often from my daughter before I hear about it from the news because they are constantly plugged in. And so today it's important to talk to my friend, education policy expert, kid expert, mom on all of these things and find out what we can do. This is going to be like a brainstorming episode, but we're also going to tap into some of the good things that have happened and figure out how we can leverage those wins to produce more wins for our kids, because at the end of the day, everything that is happening right now, whether it be the ICE raids in Los Angeles and elsewhere that are making kids afraid to go to school and making families afraid to take their kids to school. I already saw a report that the attendance is actually down because of that. And so that doesn't just affect kids of immigrant families, that affects the kids that they go to school with as well. So a lot of parents out there might be thinking, how does this affect me? 100%. It affects you. So without further ado, I want to bring in a good friend, Frazz. Help!
Hi.
Help, Frazz! Mayday! Mayday!
Hi, you guys. Hi, Maya.
Hi! Fascism is coming for our kids.
It's insanity right now. Every day is something new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like it. I have not been able to keep up. I said earlier today, I feel like I would be making content 24/7 if I covered everything that happened that actually matters, because we're at a point now where I feel like it's the emergency room and everything that's coming through the front door is an actual emergency. Like, it's not just like, oh, we triage this and we take care of that, we send them home with no, it's like everybody needs to see the doctor right now. So before we start, I want to talk about something positive, so we can start on a positive note. There was a policy win around disability and students' rights. Can you talk about that really quickly?
Yes. So the Supreme Court issued a unanimous ruling in the AJT versus Oseo schools. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I forget. It's been a minute since I listened to the oral arguments,
Mhm.
but it's in Minnesota. And there was a student who really the like nitty gritty of the case almost doesn't matter once it hit the Supreme Court. But what was going on is this student has seizures in the morning. Typically, she has epilepsy, and at her old school they had night classes, evening classes for her. And at her new school, when her family moved, they weren't accommodating her in the same way. A lot of people got hung up on the night school bit, and they actually worked back and forth for a couple of years with the family and the school district to try to come up with a reasonable accommodation for this student, and they just couldn't do it. And it got to the point where the family was like, I feel like you're actually not trying. The
Mhm.
thing, though, is that in order to prove in a K through 12 public school setting that you are being discriminated against, you have to prove gross and willful negligence. And that is a higher standard than anybody else has to hit for like discrimination cases. Nobody in colleges, nobody in workplaces, none of that. Just applied in K through 12 schools. So by the time it hit the Supreme Court, it wasn't about the exact accommodation anymore. So really, you can feel however you feel about the parents' request for whatever accommodation. The core of this case was, should K through 12 public school education students have to meet a higher burden of proof to say that they have been discriminated against than anyone else under the ADA? And when I was listening to the oral arguments, the justices were like legitimately confused. Like they were like, wait, so why is this so? And they ended up issuing a unanimous ruling saying that that is now struck down. Now everybody has the same just discrimination suing abilities as everybody else. So big win, very exciting, especially as we're seeing things like civil rights protections stripped away. We're seeing attacks on not ADA. We're seeing attacks on IDEA and Section 504. So
Well, And it's a
Yeah.
public comment period right now for a case that is headed, correct?
The public comments are for the stated grant priorities of the
Okay.
Department of Education.
Okay.
Also, a great moment though, because that's an opportunity for us to use our voices that we don't always get. And they have to read them. So a lot of people have been like, but Frazz, they don't listen to us. And I'm like, yeah,
Feels like
but
it.
we can flood that inbox and let them know how we feel about things like DEI, DEIA, and SEL being eliminated from schools. And we can say, like, this is how it would affect me. This is how it would affect my
Mhm.
community, my kids, my school, all of that kind of stuff. So that public comment period is open for 2 more days. And I've pinned my carousel about how to put in those public comments to the top of my Instagram page. So you can just go and it has everything you need to let them know, because we really not only have to take the wins that we can get from the Supreme Court right now, but also use our voices whenever we have the opportunity to. Otherwise, they get to just say, oh, nobody submitted any comments. They must all
Exactly.
love our policies. No, we don't.
And exactly. Well, and it's important to leave a record of how we feel as well, because it's not just about what's happening in the present, it's in the future. We want people to look back and say, oh, there was actually a strong opposition to this. And so without leaving those records, I mean, obviously the Trump administration could go ahead and delete those records because they love to delete a database. That's like one of their favorite things to do.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's important to comment. I made comments on the US v. Scrimetti case, which was this decision was issued today. So we talked about wins. Let's talk about losses, and not just losses for the trans community, for LGBTQ youth, but I want to talk about that in the context of what it means when a Supreme Court decides on something that affects those rights, but then also the kids in the future, the kids who are friends of trans kids. This has far reaching impacts, but also once the Supreme Court can kind of say, hey, we can go ahead for let the states do whatever they want here, that's starting to set a dangerous precedent. Can you talk about, like, as an educator, and how kids are affected by this, regardless of what state they're in? Because, and for everybody who doesn't know about US v. Scrimetti, they've now made it so that states can ban gender-affirming care, and they can just do that. So, what does that mean in real terms? When my daughter was looking at schools, she couldn't look at schools in states where she might not be able to get medical care. We just tossed those out. So Frazz, let's talk about how this affects the kids everywhere, regardless.
Yes, I think people get hung up sometimes on that is a red state issue. I'm in a
Mhm.
blue state, so I'm safe. I'm in California, so I see this a lot. And I naively totally felt that way, like maybe,
Mhm.
2020. The thing is, these policies, not just at the Supreme Court level, but at state level, they do infiltrate other states, because an interesting thing that the Heritage Foundation does, if Project 2025, if you guys know, is written by the Heritage Foundation. One of the things the Heritage Foundation does is they write sample legislature. So they will write sample laws that can be then introduced in states or local governments. And it kind of, we see it a lot with things like the 10 Commandments being posted in classrooms. You can kind of trace this thread. One state introduces a bill saying, I want to display the 10 Commandments in public schools across the state. It gets struck down, but then they get feedback from that. They figure out why it got struck down and they rewrite it and introduce it in another state. And this happens in kind of like a string until they figure it out. Somebody gets it into their state, and then everybody is like, give me that exact piece of legislation. And then they
Mhm.
reintroduce it. And it often goes again to the Supreme Court. But this goes everywhere. And I'm like a little bit of a nerd about this, because also when you look at things like standardized testing or textbook companies, they also appeal to the highest bidder. Texas is huge and has a
Hmm.
lot of very red Republican policies. These textbook companies, these standardized testing companies, will appeal to these large states like Texas because that's money in their pocket for them. So when you're talking, and that goes nationwide. So when you're talking about things like, oh, it's just a red state problem, it's absolutely not, just from like the logistical standpoint. And also, then you got to look at the rhetoric that's being spread. These so many on so many fronts. The things that are being said about students and families and vulnerable groups of people are often heinous, like point blank.
Yeah.
And that rhetoric on the national stage, kids are paying attention to that. Kids
Hmm.
do listen to that. And it goes into schools, and any teacher can tell you something hits the news, and their third grade classroom is like they're all talking about it. And then you have to have a circle time about, like, hey, maybe we don't talk about that in school. Or, hey, that's really disrespectful. Here's why you
Hmm.
can't say stuff like that. Um,
So
it's
when you just said third grade, which made me go like, because when my daughter was in third grade, nobody was, the kids weren't watching the news. They weren't getting news from social media. Whereas now, I think there was just a survey, most people get their news from social media now, which means our kids are plugged in. But you're telling me as young as 8 years old, third grade?
yes. But I've also, when I was teaching kindergarten, I, especially if I had kids with older siblings, would still have
Mm.
kids coming in and saying things that they had seen on the news or Roblox. If their sibling
Sick.
plays Roblox, and right now Roblox is having like ICE protests. Did you see
I
that?
saw that. I did see that.
So they're very like plugged into what's going on just because it's absolutely everywhere. And
Mhm.
YouTube has a really nice voice search capability that you don't even have to be able to spell. You can be a 5-year-old, like, show me videos of blank, and it will literally serve that to you. So, yeah, it's younger than third grade. They're listening and they're watching.
That is it's so terrifying to me because on one hand it's like, oh great, the kids are informed, and on the other hand it's like, oh god, the kids are informed. And so and oftentimes perhaps maybe more than adults, but they're more susceptible to the algorithms, obviously. So what they're being fed might lead to the indoctrination that the right claims that progressives are doing. So alarming. And I cut you off in the middle of a different point that I want to like come back to. But can you talk then about, because if this is what kids are talking about in school, whether it's 8 years old or they're 12 or 13, what does this do to the learning environment for all kids?
It's, of course, a distraction because a lot of the stuff that they're talking about is very emotional, and kids
Mhm.
just don't know how to process a lot of these emotions. So we have to, help them navigate these things that they're hearing and seeing at home and on the TV. And that's something that I do think since 2020, when COVID hit and lockdown and everything, we've started to become more mindful of, because you just can't ignore it at a certain point. At a certain point, it's like your whole day is going to be derailed unless you stop and address like the elephant in the room, whatever it is that day. And I have had hard conversations with my students about so many things when I was in the classroom. Like, we talked about the elections. We talked about school shootings. We talked about, like, I had once a kindergarten student who identified as transgender, and we had to have conversations about that, and like how it was interesting because it was not the kids, it was adults that were being hateful to the child, and the kids didn't get it. And it's
Mm.
conversations like that where you're like, yeah, I don't get it either. And some people just are really hateful. There's no other word for it. But you got to figure out how to kidify it sometimes, and that is very difficult. We're also trying to deal with like learning loss and all kinds of trauma that these kids are incurring. I mean, it's a new world out there in the classroom. And I really feel for teachers who are still in it, trying to navigate these things that kids are facing today, because it's only gotten more compounded over time. You know what I mean?
I see
And
that and I hear that from my
yeah,
teacher friends who, like, they're not okay. The people
no,
who I know who are in classrooms right now have not even had the space themselves to process. So how can, 'cause most people who are watching, and we're all traumatized, right? You, me, everybody, like we're all traumatized by what's happening.
yeah.
Um, for the people who are watching who are probably not educators, how can we better support educators and bring more attention to the reality of what's happening versus the story that right-wing media is telling about what's happening in schools?
That's such a good question. One of the things I always say is to listen to teachers first. And it sounds like a no brainer to you and I'm sure a lot of people listening, but it's something that is so rare to truly listen to what teachers are saying. And if you're wondering where to start, somewhere like AFT or NEA, like one of the big unions, they're
Mhm.
usually amplifying stories and issues of teachers on the ground and giving you really actionable steps to take to support those teachers. But in every step of the way, for any law, anything going on in the classroom, anything you hear about, like think to yourself, what are teachers saying? And that can be something where you go into your kid's school and you just chat with a teacher and you're like, hey, what can I do? How are you doing? And sometimes it's going to be like, can you make these copies for me? And sometimes it's going to be like, one time I was like, I don't have an air conditioner. Can you tell the principal to listen to you? Because they won't listen to me. I think I told that story last time I was on,
Yeah.
maybe. But, you know, really like thinking about our teachers' voices at the table for whatever is being decided, including school boards. Um, so many of the things that are happening to teachers are kind of placed upon them and they don't have any say. A lot of school boards have a rule that you can't be a teacher on the school board, which is really difficult because then it's like you have no teachers' voices in the room
Yeah.
again, very intentionally so.
Mhm.
So that's where I would always say to start is like talking to them because they are not okay. Like you said, they're really not.
Mhm. No, yeah, none of us are. Someone who's definitely not okay is Linda McMahon. What the, like? Okay, there's so much going on in the world that it almost feels like our public education, the Secretary of Education, has taken a back seat, like back seat, back burner, not even in the kitchen, if you will. And like it's almost like she's getting a pass on being a complete, and because right now people have called for Christy Noem to step down, um, but it feels like Linda McMahon is getting a pass. Can we talk about how it's possible that we maybe, is there a way to get rid of this woman, to get her out of there?
I honestly, I think step one is paying attention to her because it is painful. If you are, I guess you're all on Substack, aren't you?
Yes.
If
Hi,
you
everyone.
are on Substack, like you currently are, I have a 3-part thing from 2 weeks ago because Linda McMahon was just constantly up in Congress testifying. I watched probably 6 hours of this
I'm so
woman
sorry.
speaking. It was brutal. I mean, you just it was a lot of I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that. Really painful. But I did recap some of the biggest moments of that
Mhm.
and I think she has taken a back seat because her job is to dismantle the Department of Education, and a lot of things are going on around her and to her. And there's a lot of conversations where they're like, so was that Doge or was that you? And she's like, well, that happened before I got there, so that must have been Doge. It's like she doesn't even know. It's like she's like guessing who made decisions for her. And I'm like, I think you should be
Yeah.
aware, maybe. It's really even just the things that are in um the budget itself and like the things she said. I think it was Senator Murphy, perhaps. One of the senators was like, dude, you're saying that we don't have any research for the trio programs that you're cutting. your own department did the research. Like you did
Mhm.
it. Why haven't you read that? And you showed up here to testify today. And she has no answer. It's bananas.
Well, and it's the incompetence of it all,
It's
coupled
so
with
insulting.
it's incredibly insulting and coupled with the cruelty, but also I would assume that would also have an effect on our kids because the death of expertise, like, oh, is that how you can get a job just by like not doing the job?
Oh, 100%. My friend teaches high school, and she said that she had to have really weird conversations with her students this year who came in and they were like, "So why is so and so appointed to that cabinet position? Why?" And she had to be like, I literally don't know." And look at her high school students and be like, "Beats me." And that's just not how you want to. As an adult, like kids do find solace and like the grown-ups know the answers.
Hmm.
Even the big kids in high school want like somebody to know. And it's very unsettling when an adult is like, I actually have no clue what's going on right
Hmm.
now. It's very upsetting. But yeah, it's just a disaster. And I think that because she's so removed from everything, the best way to like, we can't quote unquote get rid of her probably, but like paying attention to things like the budget that she's pushing and
Hmm.
pushing back and, you know, calling your representatives and being like, this is bonkers. Like, don't get rid
Hmm.
of Gear Up, don't get rid of Trio, and really like making those phones ring off the hook. I know people think that that doesn't matter. It really does. I promise. Um, like, do that. Like, just be a squeaky wheel because the
You know,
people on the other side are always squeaky wheels. They
this
never
is
stop.
they're coordinated squeaky wheels. Like they're like they're so very coordinated and targeted. There was a comment from the
Mhm.
viewer that they are the true definition of DEI, the candidates, Hegseth,
Oh, yeah.
these people. I mean, they're the true definition of it, which makes it very difficult to talk about meritocracy because the death of expertise trickles down, right? Like, are your friends who are teachers? Has anybody seen students start to like half-ass things because, well, why not? Can I?
Oh, absolutely. But also the rise of AI has really made that accessible. And now we're seeing things. Oh my, this fly loves me. Um, I'm just so sweet over here. The thing about like the executive order saying like AI is going to be in every school, like AI is already in every school. They're already all up on that. And like really it's difficult, I think, coupled with the fact that like we have AI, we have kids that are going through trauma and strife, and we have like chaos abounding in our country. I think
Mhm.
all three of those things go in hand to say like kids are kind of checked out in a way, and we're dealing
Mm.
with like behavior stuff in schools. And then also you have, like you said, the death of expertise and these people just getting assigned willy-nilly to these cabinet level positions. I mean, it's it's like the perfect storm for kids to check out. And I really feel like for teachers who are trying to compete with
Mhm.
the lack of attention span and the behavior struggles and everything together that's going on right now, cuz yes, I'm hearing like unanimously that it's an
Mhm.
issue in schools.
Well, and so they're tapped out in that way, but they're tapped in, as you mentioned, on Roblox. A lot of students are on there protesting. Let's talk about ICE and these immigration policies and how they're coming into schools and how different school districts are responding to that. Because we've seen in New York with Dylan, the student who was taken, and I think he's now his case is reopened. Thank goodness. But we're seeing the impacts of these raids on schools. Can you talk a little bit about like LAUSD issued a policy around graduation to protect students? Can you talk a little bit about that so people know that school systems are doing something to protect kids?
Yes, LAUSD has been very proactive the entire time, actually. They immediately started passing out red cards like the second that this stuff started coming down the pipe with immigration and ICE and everything. They've
What's a
always
red
been on.
card for people who
Oh,
don't know what a
yes.
red card? Because I'm like, I'm thinking soccer, it's
Oh,
FIFA, red card. I
Yes, no, they have these red cards. They're like a business card, and they
Mhm,
have like your rights, and they're in English and Spanish. So they have like what you need to know. They have printable versions as well online, I believe.
mhm,
But you can literally know your rights, so that if you encounter ICE, you can pull out your red card and like read what you need to do or say. Um, they started that right away. They sent home letters right away with the red cards. And then now, as you mentioned, with graduation, there's been some issues where there was like an ICE raid right outside of an elementary school. So parents are of course on guard. It's a very scary moment, and it's just very close to home. So for graduation, they are having extra security, police, things like that, watching to make sure that the graduation itself is protected.
mhm.
And the superintendent is very committed to that at LAUSD.
So, Heritage Foundation templates bad policy across the country. Who can we look to for creating good policies to protect students and to protect families?
That's a wonderful question. I mean, I have my favorite representatives in Congress. I think
Mhm.
Representative Joanna Hayes, oh my God, I can't speak. Representative Hayes is amazing, always
Okay,
introducing
everybody,
good
mark that
policies.
name down because I actually, where is
Mhm.
Representative Hayes out of? Because I don't know.
Oh my gosh. I knew this in my,
I'm
I knew
looking
this
it up.
before, and now I don't.
Somebody
But
look it
yes,
up and drop it in the chat.
Rep Hayes, she's amazing.
Mhm,
She was a former teacher of the year, always, always on top of it. Um, but also things like the ACLU. I would say like
mhm,
follow Rep Hayes and the ACLU, see what's being introduced and what bills you can support, but also what legal cases you can support. The ACLU is like the front lines right now for
mhm.
blocking all of this stuff. Um, they are always in court. They're really, really on top of it.
It feels like it. I've been following their work. I'm a card carrying member of the ACLU. Like there's a song if you've watched the show Crazy Ex Girlfriend where she's like card carrying
Yes.
member of the ACLU. That's me. Um,
Yes.
so supporting the ACLU and okay, Representative Hayes out of Connecticut. Thank you, Sam.
Should have known it was
Appreciate you.
Connecticut.
So supporting these lawmakers because
Mhm.
policy can still protect us. Is that what I'm
Yes.
hearing? Okay.
Yes. And I think that the legislative branch can protect us. Like, I really do think that they are when we see things like executive orders come down and people are like, "Oh, well, you don't have to follow the executive orders." I fear you do a little bit. There's a lot of times like where the executive order doesn't have an action item or doesn't have a timeline or whatever, and it's very like arbitrary. Those
Hmm.
don't do diddle. But if they have like action items or whatever, unless unless they're backdated to like a later date or they're or future dated, you know what I mean? Like, oh, in
Yes.
30 days we're gonna do X, Y, or Z.
Hmm.
Unless they say something like that, or they need like a big shift of infrastructure put in place to be able to
Hmm.
do whatever they say they're gonna do. They start doing damage right away. So when that happens, we're looking at the courts to block them at least temporarily while we figure out what the heck we're going to do next, or if that was even legal in the first place, because the legal system is very slow, but the blocks can happen way faster.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think that's a great line of protection. And again, the bills, it's difficult because the Republicans control Congress. Of course, we need to flip the
Hmm.
House in 2026. Everybody knows how important that is. Um, because it's hard. It's hard to get them to flip. They are loyalists. They are like, oh my gosh, even the Congress people who know that what is
Hmm.
happening is wrong, and they go to their town halls and they might like mention that, oh, this is crazy, or oh, like this is nuts. Well, then you go and you vote for it. Like,
Hmm.
give me a break. They're not breaking party lines, you know. So
And you would think that, actually supporting our children's education would be at least, even if not bipartisan, that the people who are in the middle who are trying to appeal to moderates or independents would say, hey, you know what, we can come together a law, for these specific and certain policies. One would think.
One
One would,
would think, and I feel like we used to, like,
we used
that
to think.
used to happen. I mean, Every Student Succeeds Act was very bipartisan. It
Mhm.
was it was very bipartisan, and now it's like, uh, could they even pass something like that? Would they even, just because a Democrat said something, they would just be like, "Meh, meh."
Yeah, and that I think goes towards what you were saying, where the kids want to look to the adults in the room and say, okay, the
Yes.
adults have got this. Right now, seeing that we
Mhm.
can't even come together across what
I know.
should be basic rights
Mhm.
is probably has the kids going, oh, the adults don't got this. The adults are looking at the other adults going, oh, we don't got this. And so I want to finish. We started on that high note with with the policy win, and so I want to try to get us back to a high note for wrapping. So, No King's protest that I saw a lot of people say, don't bring kids to it. Da, 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 da. The protest that I was at had a ton of families, had a ton of kids. People were out, and it was very community oriented, which we all know community is what helps make democracy work. It's like the glue that builds the trust that helps us stay together. Can you talk about your thoughts on No King's protest and what our next steps could be from there?
Oh, it was so amazing. Ours was,
Mhm.
we had a lot of families at ours too, and it was so much bigger than I thought it was going to be. I'm like, I didn't go to the main one in downtown, but I was like, oh, this will be a smaller one. It'll be small. It was huge, and it went for like 2 hours longer than it was quote unquote scheduled to. And
Mhm.
that hope is something that, like, for me, fills me up. Like, I there are different levels, of course, of like civic engagement, but the thing that I really enjoyed about No Kings is that it makes visible in your real world and your
Mhm.
community the kind of thing that we see online. I feel like it's so much easier to follow influencers online and politics online and be like, I see that people are doing things, but it's so detached from yourself and your
Mhm.
own community that, like, being at an event that has so many like-minded people, it just feels like a breath of fresh air, and it makes me want to keep going, especially because so much of the legislation that will protect us is at the local level. We talked about legislation protecting you. It's so easy to be like, oh, that's distant in Washington. The
Mhm.
Republicans control Congress, whatever, whatever. But here in your neighborhood, in your school board, in your local, like, state education, whatever, I mean, your local lawmakers, you have control there. You have a lot more power there. And to see it in person, like, that's big, I think. So I think, like, finding, for me, one of my biggest things, I just moved into a new neighborhood. So one of the biggest things for me is plugging in with my
Mhm.
literal community and, like, finding who is active politically here, where can I plug in, to keep that kind of feeling of hope and activism going in the real world, off the internet.
Yes.
um because, gosh, I just
Yeah.
need to get off the internet sometimes.
Well, and my thing is, I always say, like, I'm an analog girl trying to make it in a digital world. Like, I was not made for the internet. I'm forcing myself to be here, guys. I'm doing this for y'all.
Relatable. Yeah, I know. I'm
But
always like, don't perceive me. Like, my friends are like, I saw a video you made, and I'm like, no, you actually didn't. I don't do that.
well, is it like I saw somebody at so I went to a couple protests as well. I started in Santa Monica in the Palisades Park area. Almost got distracted by a bunch of squirrels because there's a whole squirrel infestation happening. Have you seen them? It's
In Santa
insane.
Monica?
In Santa Monica, they're so
No.
cute.
I'm
For I
getting in the
need
car right
everybody
now.
to go. No, they're like I need everybody to know who's watching. I'm obsessed with squirrels. Like I used to let squirrels like come into my house. And so I showed up at the protest and there were like dozens everywhere. And I was like, are you going to the protest? Like you should come to the protest. And my daughter also was like, we were fixated on these squirrels and it's like, oh, we got to go. We're running late. But luckily it was so huge, as you mentioned.
Oh yeah.
Our protest also went hours after it was supposed to end, and was so many people I ran into friends from college. My daughter ran into friends from high school, from after school programs. We ran into neighbors. In the West Side's big. It's not like everybody's like all condensed. And there were protests also in Playa Vista that were huge, and then Culver we drove through, and that one was huge on our way into downtown. And it gave me that. And there we saw one of my daughter's teachers from the school, and so all that to confirm, yes, this is true what you said. It gives that feeling of these people are real. They matter. These kids matter. We matter. And we can do this. Like I started crying, and when I was crying and I ran into my all of a sudden there were my neighbors and I was like, I'm crying because democracy makes me so happy.
It was beautiful.
It was beautiful. And also it made me go like, it was like every once in a while, we start to think that we've given up, right? Like you'll go online and it looks so defeatist and it feels scary. And so to go out and see everybody together, it's like, we haven't given up. We've got this. This is a milestone. We're still in it. I think it scares the bejesus out of Republicans that we're still going, they're like, okay, what else are we going to throw at them? And so, yeah, I feel the same way. And so I hope everybody watching also had a chance to get to a protest. And if you don't have the opportunity or can't get to a protest, know that we are out there protesting for you. And I love what you said about finding and plugging into your new community. I think a lot of people aren't even plugged into their existing community, and it's important to find that third space and have those conversations with strangers so strangers can become friends. Yeah. So that's a positive note. That's all I wanted. We did it. Frazz, thank you for coming on and sharing with us all of the knowledge. I know you have a very, very, very busy life and schedule. So I love it whenever you make time to grace our Substack with your presence. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation. It's always a pleasure. Always.
Look at us. Look at us having so much fun. It's always a pleasure, y'all. See, democracy is fun. We're having fun. We're doing it. And you, of course, Frazz, you are welcome back anytime. So
Thank you.
thanks. Bye. Guys, all right. I'm hyped up. We're doing this. We all know that what affects us affects our kids. And so everything that's happening in the world right now, all of this craziness, it is on us to learn how to process it, because then we can help our children. And even if we don't have children, we can help. You remember the whole, like, it takes a village? We can help our friends and neighbors and their kids be able to process these things. And so I want to say, for everybody who's feeling overwhelmed right now, I get it. I get it. After this weekend, I was like, I'm exhausted. My, throat hurt. I don't know if that was allergies or irritants from tear gas, because it could have been. We'll talk about that on another show. But it is so important to learn how to take the time that we need, breaks that we need, so that we can keep going. And so I like to do what I call the HIT method of work. So like, I'll go really hard when I can, and then when I can't, I just dial back and I don't allow myself to feel guilty. It's like the high impact interval training from working out. I apply that to everything. So find what works for you to be able to unplug. If that's just like putting your phone in a drawer or just saying, I'm not going to look at the news for 24/7. It doesn't mean you're not staying informed. It means you're taking important breaks for yourself. So please take a break for yourself. There's too much going on right now, and find a friend and do a buddy system and say, hey, if anything crazy happens while I'm not plugged in, let me know about it. But it's got to be super crazy, which unfortunately right now seems like everything is super crazy. Anyway, thank you for joining Punching Up. We'll be back next week, same time. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and figure out when we're going to do our next protest, because I am ready for it. See you later.